Before the world as mortals knew it, before the rule of Olympus, there was only chaos, a vast, infinite void that stretched beyond comprehension. From this emptiness, the primordial gods emerged, their forms born of raw, untamed energy. Among them was Nyx, the goddess of the night, a being of immeasurable power and mystery, darker than the deepest abyss and older than time itself. She drifted silently across the newborn cosmos, her presence weaving the fabric of darkness itself. Her black robes shimmered like the endless void, and her piercing silver eyes held the wisdom of eternity. She bore many children, each embodying forces that shaped the world. Hypnos, sleep, and Thanatos, death, who walked hand in hand through the dreams and endings of mortals. Eris, strife, whose laughter sparked discord among gods and men, and Nemesis, retribution, who weighed the scales of justice. Though feared by gods and mortals alike, Nyx rarely intervened in the squabbles of Olympus, for her domain was far greater than their petty struggles. However, one night, as the constellations shimmered in the heavens, a prophecy was whispered among the Moirai, the three fates, their ancient voices weaving a foreboding future, one where even mighty Zeus would bow before the night. The prophecy spread like whispers carried on the wind, slithering through the halls of Olympus like an unseen serpent. Zeus, mighty king of the gods, sat upon his golden throne, his brow furrowed in deep concern. Though he had cast down the Titans and claimed dominion over the heavens, the mere suggestion that he could be overthrown unsettled him to his core. His storm-filled eyes darkened, and the air around him crackled with restrained fury. He summoned Themis, the Titaness of divine law and order, seeking her wisdom. Themis, her expression solemn and unreadable, stepped forward. "The night is eternal, Zeus," she intoned, her voice carrying the weight of ancient truth. "It was before you, and it shall be after you. Do not seek to chain what cannot be bound." But Zeus, ever prideful and defiant, refused to heed her words. He would not allow a force beyond his control to threaten his throne. If Nyx posed a danger, he would face her as he had faced the Titans. He called upon Hermes, swift messenger of the gods, whose winged sandals barely touched the ground as he approached. "Fly to the underworld," Zeus commanded, "and seek out Hypnos, the god of sleep. Bid him to lull Nyx into slumber. If she sleeps, her power shall wane, and Olympus shall be safe." Hermes, ever dutiful, descended into the underworld, his winged sandals barely making a sound as he slipped past the gates of Eris. Shadows coiled around him, whispering secrets of forgotten souls, and the air grew thick with the weight of unspoken dreams. Deeper into the abyss he traveled, until he reached the domain of Hypnos, the god of sleep, whose cavern was draped in the thickest of mists. The air was heavy with the scent of poppies, and streams of silver mist curled around the chamber like living things. Hypnos reclined upon a couch of obsidian, his golden hair flowing like liquid light, his face serene and unreadable. "Son of night," Hermes addressed him with urgency, "Zeus commands you to use your power upon Nyx. If she sleeps, Olympus shall be safe, and you shall earn the favor of the king of the gods." Hypnos hesitated, his golden eyes reflecting the dim glow of the underworld. To betray his mother was an unthinkable crime, yet the wrath of Zeus was terrible. A silent war waged within him, but ultimately, fear and self-preservation won. That evening, as Nyx draped the world in her starry veil, Hypnos approached her unseen, his form slipping through the folds of night like mist. He whispered ancient words of drowsiness, each syllable laced with divine power, weaving a spell so potent that even she, the eternal night, could not resist. Nyx's silver eyes fluttered closed, and the universe dimmed, her very essence sinking into the depths of slumber. As Nyx succumbed to slumber, an unnatural stillness spread across the cosmos. The night lost its depth, its infinite vastness, and became but a mere shadow of its former self. The stars, once gleaming with her celestial essence, flickered uncertainly, as though mourning the slumber of their mother. In the deepest corners of existence, her children stirred, sensing the unnatural absence of their mother's ever-watchful presence. Thanatos, the god of death, lifted his hooded head from the endless river of souls he guided, his cold eyes narrowing with suspicion. Eris, goddess of strife, clenched her fingers into the fabric of the mortal realm, feeling an eerie silence where once discord thrived. Nemesis, the relentless force of justice, felt the balance of fate shift, an imbalance creeping into the threads of destiny. But it was Hypnos who stood frozen, staring at the motionless form of his mother, regret clenching his heart like an iron vice. He had done what was asked of him. At the sight of Nyx lying so unnaturally still, her dark form dulled and motionless, filled him with dread. Had he not just betrayed the very force that had birthed him? As the days passed, a deep unease settled over Olympus. The gods, once untouched by the terror of Nyx's power, now felt vulnerable. Zeus, despite his victory, could not shake the gnawing sensation that something was amiss. The heavens themselves seemed to grow colder, the once vibrant stars barely twinkling in the vast dark sky. The gods continued their quarrels, but a palpable tension hung in the air. With Nyx slumbering, her children became restless, their power waning as the cosmic balance faltered. Thanatos, god of death, found himself unable to guide souls as swiftly as before, the souls of the deceased wandering aimlessly in the ether. Eris, goddess of strife, found her powers muted, her chaos no longer finding its spark. Nemesis, bound by the need for justice, sensed the scales tipping, but they did not tip in any direction she knew. The once flawless precision of her judgments faltered, leaving the gods in a state of uneasy paralysis. And yet, amidst it all, there was one force still active, still flowing through the veins of existence. Nyx's eternal night was far from gone. It was only dormant, like a beast awaiting its awakening. Far beneath the heavens, in the realms of the underworld, Hypnos paced restlessly in his cavern. The weight of his actions pressed on him like a crushing stone, and his mind raced with the fear that he had made a grave mistake. He had silenced the night, but he had also silenced something vital, a force too immense to be bound by sleep. He could feel her stirring. Even in her slumber, the tremors of her power reverberating through the very fabric of reality. The dreamscapes of mortals began to blur, twisted and distorted by the absence of true darkness. The gods had unwittingly thrown the world out of balance, and Hypnos knew that the time would soon come for Nyx to awaken. But when she did, she would not be the same. As he stood on the precipice of his decision, a shadow crossed the threshold of his cavern, and a soft, mournful voice reached his ears. "It is not too late, my son," the voice whispered. Hypnos turned to see the figure of his mother, her dark form emerging from the deep shadows of his domain, her silver eyes gleaming with an ancient understanding. Nyx had awoken. The moment Nyx's eyes fluttered open, a ripple of cosmic energy surged through the heavens and the underworld alike. The universe, once dimmed by her slumber, now shook with the force of her return. The stars, her children, rekindled their brilliant glow, and the darkness once more stretched across the cosmos like an infinite cloak. The gods, trembling in the wake of her awakening, looked to Zeus for guidance, but the king of the gods could not deny the truth. Nyx's power was far beyond anything they had ever imagined. She was not merely the night. She was the essence of existence itself, the primal force from which all things had emerged and to which all things would eventually return. Nyx's voice rang out like the echo of eternity, her tone calm but heavy with wrath. "You dared to silence me, Zeus," she intoned, her eyes blazing with a cosmic fury. "You sought to bind what is beyond your control, and in doing so, you have unraveled the fabric of your own dominion." Her gaze fell upon Hypnos, her son, and a strange sadness flickered in her eyes. "And you, my child, have betrayed me. But fear not. You will learn that the night cannot be conquered by sleep, nor by any other force of the gods." As Nyx spoke, her power surged like a tidal wave, and the very fabric of Olympus began to tremble. It was not just the gods who were at risk. The mortal world, too, felt the weight of her wrath, as the balance between day and night, life and death, began to crumble. The gods stood paralyzed, their once unchallenged dominion slipping through their fingers like sand. Zeus, though still mighty, could not deny the overwhelming force Nyx commanded. His thunderous voice, which had once shaken the heavens, faltered in her presence. "What is it that you want, Nyx?" he asked, though the question sounded hollow, even to his own ears. "You have already been given dominion over the night. Why do you seek more?" Nyx's gaze never wavered from him. "I seek nothing, Zeus," she replied, her voice resonating with the weight of eons. "It is you who have taken what was never yours to claim. You have usurped the natural order, and for that, you will answer." Her words hung heavy in the air, and with them, a great and terrible silence fell over the gods of Olympus. Eris, still lingering on the fringes of the scene, felt the stirrings of unrest within her. The very balance of the world had shifted. Her power, once chaotic and boundless, now seemed fragile in the wake of Nyx's return. The goddess of strife had always thrived on discord, but now, with the universe teetering on the edge of destruction, she could sense something far more terrible than mere chaos. A cosmic reckoning. The great halls of Olympus trembled again, and from the very skies above, the thunderclouds that had gathered in Zeus's fury parted, allowing a sliver of light to pierce the darkness. But even that light was dimmed by the shadow of Nyx, her presence swallowing the radiance of the god's rule. Nyx's words were like a prophecy, an inevitable truth that hung heavy over Olympus. Her gaze shifted toward the gathered gods, and she spoke with the quiet authority of the ages, each syllable pressing upon the minds of all who heard. "You have forgotten the truth of existence, gods of Olympus. You believe yourselves to be eternal, but you are but fleeting sparks in the endless night. I am the beginning and the end, the space between breaths, the endless void that cradles all life and consumes it in the end. You have defied the natural order for far too long, Zeus, and now you will learn the consequences of that folly." With emotion as fluid as the night sky itself, Nyx raised her hand, and from the depths of the void, her children emerged. Thanatos, his skeletal form now wreathed in the shadows of death, moved to her side, his cold eyes reflecting the darkness of their shared domain. Eris, goddess of strife, stood beside him, her laughter no longer a mere disruption, but a force that echoed through the halls of Olympus. Nemesis, the embodiment of justice, now appeared as a terrifying presence, her wings unfurling with a sharp gust that sent the gods reeling. They were no longer mere aspects of Nyx. They were her heralds, her instruments of fate. Zeus, though shaken, drew his lightning bolt in defiance. "I will not bow to you, Nyx," he declared, his voice growing stronger despite the storm of fear that threatened to consume him. "You are not the only force of power in this universe." Nyx's smile was as cold as the void itself. "You misunderstand, Zeus. I do not require your submission, nor do I seek your power. I seek balance. And in this moment, balance demands something far greater than you could ever comprehend." With a final, sweeping motion of her hand, the very fabric of reality shifted, and a great rift opened between the realms of the gods and mortals. The gods of Olympus, their power once unrivaled, found themselves pulled toward the edges of this rift, their domains faltering in the wake of Nyx's return. The gods of Olympus struggled against the pull of the rift, but it was futile. The fabric of their dominion was unraveling, the divine realm slipping from their grasp like sand through a sieve. The once proud gods, whose rule had stretched across time and space, now found themselves helpless before the primordial force of Nyx. Even Zeus, the king of gods, could feel the overwhelming weight of her power, an ancient, inescapable force that transcended the arrogance of Olympus. In that moment, the realization dawned upon him. Nyx was not simply a goddess of the night, but the embodiment of the universe's most primal truths. The night was not a mere absence of light. It was the beginning of all things, the very essence of existence, both feared and revered by those who dare to understand it. And now, with her children by her side, Nyx was reclaiming her dominion, not in anger, but as a force of cosmic justice. Her silver eyes met Zeus's, and for a brief moment, There was an understanding between them, a recognition of the inevitability of change, of the cycles that govern all things. The gods of Olympus had ruled, but now it was Nyx's turn to remind them of their place in the grand design. As Nyx's form began to recede into the cosmos, taking her children with her, a new silence fell over Olympus. It was not the silence of slumber, but the quiet of something far deeper, the silence of balance restored. In the aftermath of Nyx's departure, Olympus was forever changed. The gods no longer carried the weight of unquestioned supremacy. The once bright halls of their celestial palace, gleaming with golden pillars and divine light, now seemed distant, almost hollow. The gods, shaken and humbled, were left to reflect on the course they had taken and the consequences of their actions. The prophecy that had whispered through the Moirai, the very prophecy that had set these events into motion, had come to pass. Zeus, despite his might, could not ignore the humbling truth that even he, the ruler of Olympus, was not beyond the reach of the forces older and greater than any god. The rift between the realms had sealed, but the memory of Nyx's power lingered, leaving a shadow over Olympus. The gods, while still divine, no longer felt invulnerable. The night was now no longer just the domain of darkness, but a reminder that the very foundation of their rule had been tested by the primordial force of the cosmos. Hermes, who had once carried out Zeus's orders to subdue the night, now found himself wandering in solitude. The speed and wit that had made him the messenger of the gods felt futile in the wake of the greater truth Nyx had revealed. Even he could not outrun the cosmic balance that existed beyond their divine meddling. The balance of the universe had shifted, and Nyx, though absent from Olympus, remained a constant presence in the hearts and minds of the gods. In the quiet aftermath of her wrath, the gods were forced to reconsider their roles. The Fates, who had foreseen the coming of the night's judgment, now appeared before Zeus in a vision, their ancient voices resonating in his mind. The threads of fate are spun. Zeus, the eldest Fate, Clotho whispered, "You have walked your path, and the time has come for the cycle to turn. It is not only you who governs Olympus. It is all forces, those you can see and those you cannot. The gods of Olympus are but one part of the eternal weave, and even the night must have its place." Zeus, though humbled, still bore the pride of the king. "What then will happen to Olympus?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Will we be forever at the mercy of forces beyond our control?" The second Fate, Lachesis, replied, her voice like the toll of a distant bell. "Not at the mercy, but in harmony. The gods of Olympus must learn to coexist with the primordial forces, for they are a part of the greater whole. The night, like the day, is not an enemy to be defeated, it is a companion to be respected." The youngest of the Fates, Atropos, who held the shears of fate, remained silent for a moment before speaking. "You will find the strength to rule not by defying the night, but by understanding it. For it is not the end you fear, but the beginning of a new balance." With that, the vision faded, leaving Zeus with a lingering sense of uncertainty and resolve. The prophecy had spoken of a time when even the gods would bow to the night, but it had not spoken of the path to restoration. Now, the gods of Olympus had no choice but to adapt, to find a way to coexist with the very forces they had once sought to control. As the gods of Olympus began to reflect on the wisdom of the Fates, a strange peace descended upon them. It was not the peace of complacency, but the quiet of acceptance. They were not invincible, not masters of the universe, but part of a greater, ever-turning cycle. And as they accepted this truth, the world began to change. The forces of the universe, light and dark, life and death, found a new rhythm, a new balance. Nyx's return had not been the end of the gods, but a new beginning. The gods of Olympus, once isolated in their ivory tower, now saw themselves as players in a much larger cosmic dance. They could no longer ignore the night, nor could they simply rely on their power to shape the world. They had been reminded that they were not above the forces of the universe, but part of the intricate weave of existence. The world, both mortal and divine, was no longer a place of domination and conquest, but of coexistence. Zeus, who had once been unshaken by any force, now found a new purpose. His rule over Olympus would not be marked by power alone, but by wisdom, humility, and an understanding of the forces beyond his control. The gods had learned that they were not the only ones who shaped the world. And in this newfound understanding, the balance of the cosmos had found its place once more. The days following Nyx's awakening were not easy for the gods of Olympus. They had been irrevocably changed, not just in their understanding of the cosmos, but in their very roles within it. The gods, now aware of their fragility and the limitations of their power, began to govern with a sense of responsibility they had never known before. Zeus, once consumed by pride and the need to assert his dominance, now sought counsel from those he had once disregarded, the primordial beings who held dominion over forces greater than the gods. He spent many long nights in quiet conversation with Hermes, the Titaness of divine law, seeking her guidance on how to rule with wisdom and fairness, understanding now that power alone could not maintain order. It was through her ancient wisdom that Zeus began to understand that true leadership was not about control, but about balance. In the days that followed, the gods began to nurture their relationships with the forces of the universe they had once overlooked. Hera, the goddess of marriage and family, began working closely with Demeter, goddess of the harvest, ensuring that the rhythms of the earth flowed with care and attention to the cycles of nature. Eris, the god of war, came to understand the importance of conflict in maintaining balance, no longer seeing it as a tool of unchecked destruction, but as a necessary aspect of the ebb and flow of life. Even Poseidon, lord of the seas, came to realize the importance of temperance, learning to respect the vast, uncontrollable depths of the oceans rather than seeking to conquer them. Eris, too, found a new understanding. Her chaos, once a destructive force, became something else entirely, a catalyst for growth, a reminder that the world needed both harmony and discord to thrive. She no longer sought only to sow chaos among the gods and mortals, but to spark the necessary shifts that brought about change. The mortals, too, began to feel the effects of the gods' transformation. While Olympus had once seemed distant, a realm of distant power and divine drama, now the gods' influence was felt more subtly, interwoven into the everyday lives of those who walked the earth. The balance that the gods had restored began to manifest in the mortal realm as well. The seasons shifted with greater precision, crops flourished in their due time, and the balance between life and death became less a matter of fate and more of natural order. The cycles of nature were no longer something that could be manipulated by the whims of the gods, but something that flowed with a rhythm the mortals could feel, in tune with the very pulse of the earth. Mortals, too, began to understand their place in the grand scheme of things. No longer were they pawns in a divine game, nor subjects of capricious deities. They were co-creators of the world, aware that their actions, their choices, could have repercussions not just for their own lives, but for the world as a whole. They saw in the gods not just rulers, but caretakers of the eternal cycles, forces that worked in harmony with the natural world. Among the mortals, there was a renewed sense of reverence, not just for the gods, but for the mysteries of the night itself. The darkness, which had once been feared, now took on a new meaning. Nyx, though not present in the lives of mortals, had instilled within them a deeper understanding of the balance between light and dark, day and night, life and death. The stars, once distant and cold, now seemed like guides, leading the way through the mysteries of the universe. Years passed, and the world continued to turn in the delicate balance that Nyx had reawakened. The gods of Olympus were no longer the omnipotent beings they had once thought themselves to be. They had become part of the eternal cycle, guardians not of power, but of harmony. And as the mortal world flourished, the gods watched from their lofty heights, not with the arrogance of rulers, but with the quiet pride of caretakers, knowing they had played their part in the grand tapestry of existence. Zeus, now aged and wise, often reflected on the changes that had come to pass. He would walk the halls of Olympus in deep thought, occasionally stopping to gaze at the night sky, where the stars glimmered in perfect silence. The night was no longer a realm of terror, but a reminder of the balance that held the universe together. He had learned that power was fleeting, but wisdom was eternal. The night, once feared as Nyx's domain, was now seen for what it truly was, a vital force in the ever-turning cycle of life. The gods had learned to respect it, and in doing so, they had restored the natural order. The world was no longer ruled by domination, but by understanding and acceptance. And as the stars continued to shine, the gods knew that they had truly learned their place in the cosmos as stewards of the balance, protectors of the eternal cycle that would continue long after they were gone.